Seems like every week we ask you about KJ Lacy.
Yeah.
Give us the latest.
Yeah. He was at Westlake High School on Sunday for the Elite 11 regional, which was pretty cool. To have that event in Austin. Usually, living in Austin, you got to drive to Dallas or Houston typically to go to these kind of camps. But they had the Elite 11, and it was an all 22 camp, so it wasn't just quarterbacks. It was notable linemen, defensive backs, and there wasn't a ton. Some of the guys didn't show up, but it was still we saw some other guys beyond just KJ Lacey and the quarterbacks, but KJ came out. I was talking to his mom off to the side, and she was saying it was kind of a last minute trip for him because he wasn't on the roster earlier in the week, and she said he was telling her, he's like, "Mom, I got to go to this one. It's in Austin. I'm not there's one I think in Oxford. There's one in Nashville that might have been a little bit easier for him to get to, but he wanted to come to Austin. Obviously, that's his future home, so he wanted to come be in attendance for it, and he had a pretty good workout. It was really really windy. It was like 30-mile-per-hour gusts. So, it wasn't like, everyone had some misfires, but he earned an Elite 11 finals invite for the camp in Los Angeles this summer. And it looked pretty strong on the day. There's a lot of really talented quarterbacks there. And then, obviously Keelon Russell, the SMU commit, the Texas is recruiting now. Baylor's commit was there. There was an Oklahoma commit. Purdue commit, and some other guys, just a bunch of local guys, and then a few from out of state. But the overall, strong performance. KJ, he visited Texas yesterday, and we caught up with him, and every time we talk to him, he's he's all Texas, and there was some concern, I guess, earlier in the year from onlookers that he was going to flip to Auburn. Obviously, he's closer to Auburn. They've been pressing to flip him. He's taken some visits, but talking to him, the vibe I got was he's completely focused on Texas. He still talks to Auburn. He still talks to Ole Miss. He mentioned Oregon, but the only official visit he has set is Texas for June 21st, and then he's going to be back in Austin on April 6th. There's a big visitors weekend that day, and then April 20th for the spring game. So 3 more visits upcoming to Texas. He said he's still very happy with the decision. He was wearing a Longhorn necklace that looked pretty cool. So I think all's good on the KJ Lacey front, if you ask me.
Okay. KJ Lacy, of course, the 2025 quarterback commit for the Longhorns.
Yep.
Just so that people are clear.
Yeah, the longest tenured 2025 commit for Texas. For a minute he was, really until Emory Winston, he was the only commitment in the class, either Emory or Brandon Brown, whichever one of those two committed before the other. But June 3rd of last summer until December, he was the lone 2025 commit. So, he's been around for a while, and he's happy with Texas.
Yeah, Hank, talk about defensive tackle Brandon Brown. He was in the ATX for the first time, 4-star commit for Sark and them. Talk a little bit about his game and him as a person.
Yeah, he's a little bit undersized. He's not your Devondre Sweat type size we're talking, but if you watch his tape, man, he is just blowing guys up. That was the first thing when he committed. We knew about him, but I don't think anyone was really familiar with his game. And you watch his huddle tape, and it's just like, I forgot how long it is, but 10 minutes of just getting after guys in the backfield, and that's what jumps out immediately. He's a really aggressive player, has a lot of burst, quickness, everything you want, really. And the only knock on him is his size. But I think we've all seen, Byron Murphy has kind of dispelled any issues with that, with what he was able to do. And, I think Brandon Brown could kind of follow in that trajectory. But yeah, he was on campus for the first time. He committed to Texas without ever seeing Texas. And again, another guy that, after he committed, it was Bo Davis that was the guy going after him. He committed, Bo Davis leaves. So, I think it was a very fair question as to whether, was Brandon Brown going to hang around? Was he going to flip? Was he going to go to LSU with Bo Davis? Or, USC is pressing to flip him as well. And some other schools. He has family ties to Florida, where he's from. So I don't think anyone would have been shocked to see him flip. But he kind of just hung tight. He waited for the defensive line coach to get hired. He's gotten to know Kenny Baker, and that was the positive of the visit. So he was on campus with his 5-on-5 team, the California Power team. They were doing a tournament in Houston. They come up to Texas on Friday, and their itinerary had them leaving at 5. Like they were going to get on the road, get to Houston by 8:30 or so to get ready for the tournament on Friday. He stayed until 7:30 with his mom, just to get to know. They went in and met with Kenny Baker like just around 5, I think, and spent a couple hours with him. So all the returns are very positive. He had that tweet right after they were done that he's home. So it seems like even with Bo Davis leaving, Brandon Brown is still really happy with his decision to be committed to Texas, and that's not going to change the fact that he's going to take official visits elsewhere. He already has a handful of them set in the summer, including Texas. But it sounds like they've done what they needed to do so far, and their first impression in Austin was a really good one.
All right, so as we're kind of going through the names chronologically in the Stampede. Keelon Russell. So he's also a 2025 quarterback prospect who is committed to SMU from Duncanville. What did you see from the 4-star SMU commit who had a strong showing at the Elite 11 and is still in touch with Texas?
Yeah, the vibe I get from Keelon Russell is, you can call him an SMU commit if you want, but he is wide open. I think obviously he likes SMU a lot. They're the hometown school, but I think he's going to end up playing somewhere else. It was kind of, I was going into the Elite 11. I was like, is this going to be a little awkward with, KJ right there and Keelon right here? And, Texas maybe wants both. Well, we know Texas wants KJ. They haven't offered Keelon yet, but it sounds like they're going to here in the next, 3 or 4 weeks. But Keelon is a really talented kid. He's bigger than KJ. He can zip the ball. They're both. It's kind of interesting. Both of them have had a generational receiver to throw to. Like KJ had Ryan Williams at Saraland. Keelon has DeCorian Moore at Duncanville. So that's probably helped them a little bit. But they get into these camp settings. Especially Keelon, and he was just zipping the ball even in the high winds. He was throwing it really well, hitting his guys in stride, and he got an Elite 11 finals invite as well. But talking to him, we caught up with him at the Under Armour in Dallas a few weeks ago, and he's been talking to Texas, been talking to Milwee, Sark. He's coming out for the spring game on April 20th, and he says Texas is his dream school. The way he kind of started the interview on Sunday was, if Texas offers, like, I'm going to go to Texas, that was kind of the vibe you get. But then you ask him about, KJ's there, how would that, play into things? And he's like, I'm not afraid of competition. I would certainly be willing to go in and compete. But at the same time, and he mentioned this, that, other schools are recruiting him to come in and be the guy. So, does he want to be part of a 2 quarterback class? He's willing to, but at the same time, he's going to listen to all these schools that are, you're our guy, you're QB1 in this class. So maybe that could hurt Texas. If it comes down to it. But again, he said his quote was, if Texas offers it, it'll probably change a lot. So we'll see. I think he'll get an offer on that visit for the spring game. So we'll see if anything happens after that. But he's got an upcoming official visit to Ole Miss. He said Alabama reached out this past week. Oregon's talking to him. Name a school, they're probably talking to him. He's been a really hot recruit this spring. So it'll be interesting to see how that happens. But I think the biggest takeaway is, I think, it looks like Texas is pretty set on taking 2 quarterbacks in 2025. And it makes sense with the numbers. You assume Quinn Ewers is leaving after next season. Then, right now you would only have 2 scholarship quarterbacks on the roster in Arch Manning and Trey Owens. So, you probably need 2 guys in the class just to have your numbers right. So it'll be, if Keelan's the guy, he's the guy. But, if he sticks with SMU or goes elsewhere, it'll be interesting to see who they kind of circle back on or decide to go after later in the year.
And Keelon is pure pocket.
Yeah, that's how I would, characterize him. He's a big kid. He's a really lengthy frame. He's a lot bigger. He's probably, 3 or 4 inches taller than KJ. but yeah, man, he can sling it. So you can see kind of what Texas sees in him, kind of compared to the guys they've been recruiting under Sark.
Hank, talk about Galveston Balls, Jonah Williams, safety slash linebacker, big time 5-star that you wrote a piece on, and it looks like he's really paying attention to what Oklahoma's doing with Brent Venables, but he still considers Texas in the running. How thick is that, and how good of a player and person is he?
Yeah, he's a stud. He was the best player at Under Armour Houston 2 weeks back. He's a guy that can play linebacker, play safety. It's kind of a sensitive, touchy subject with him. I think he wants to play defensive back. He doesn't consider himself a linebacker, but he has the skill set. He can be all over the field. Oklahoma is the school that's had the most buzz. I think he has a couple of crystal ball predictions to Oklahoma. I asked him about that. I was like, people think you're going to Oklahoma. What would you say about that? And he was like, well, it's a good thing those are just predictions, because I wouldn't say that's necessarily the case. He's going to be visiting Texas with his parents on April 6th, so he's coming back for that. This time, I guess, last summer around that pool party for Texas at the end of July, kind of had a feeling that Texas was leading that recruitment. Oklahoma's obviously given him a lot to think about, and he's got other schools obviously coming after him as well. But the funniest thing of this all, not funniest, most interesting thing is, he might not even play college football. Like he's an MLB draft prospect. So, if he gets taken in the first round, he might just say no thanks and go the baseball route. And you see that sometimes. Jerry and Ely, the running back at Ole Miss, that was kind of a similar thing. He was a 5-star recruit in football, but was also getting MLB draft buzz. And I think there was a receiver for North Carolina a few years ago. You see it every once in a while, but he's a legit MLB prospect. And, it'll be interesting because he's also, looking at the idea of playing college baseball as well. And he's been talking to the Texas staff. He actually has ties to the Texas staff. One of the coaches, can't think of the name right now, but played baseball with his older brother in the Phillies organization. So, there's a lot of moving parts in that one. But again, Texas is still chugging away on that. I think it's a Texas-Oklahoma battle, but I think he's a guy that's going to take all of his official visits and then make a decision after that.
Hank, 2025 5-star offensive tackle, Josh Petty, seemed to like his time in Austin. How do you size up that recruitment?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. Offensive line is not an area, Texas is struggling to find targets in the 2025 class. You got your big three in the state of Texas with Michael Fasusi, Lamont Rogers, and Ty Haywood. You got to imagine Texas is getting one of those guys, if not more. My money's on Michael Fasusi. I think he's going to end up in Austin. It's kind of funny. I think Fasusi's going to end up in Austin. I think Haywood's going to end up at Oklahoma, and I think Lamont Rogers is going to end up at A&M. So it's like everyone's getting one of them. But then after that, there's several options. Josh Petty's is one of them. 5-star offensive tackle from the state of Georgia. You would think with Georgia's success, that's like kind of the shoe in. You're like, oh, you're next up in the line of talented offensive linemen they've had. But he's talked to Steve Wilfong after his visit to Austin on Friday, and said it was second to none. So we'll see. Get him back on an official visit, and crazier things have happened, but certainly I think Texas made a good first impression with him. And again, they have several out-of-state guys along the offensive line that they could really be seriously in play for. Petty's one of them. John Mills is another from San Francisco, 3-star offensive lineman that, it's probably going to come down to Washington, where his family all went and is from, and in Texas. And he has a top 6, but the vibe is Washington, Texas. For him, he has an official visit in the summer. Peter Lange, another guy in that area out in California, interior guy that is related to Jake Lange, who used to work for the University of Texas. So there's a connection there, and then a few others. But we saw one domino fall in the offensive line recruiting, and that's Byron Washington, the big offensive tackle from DeSoto that went viral in the state playoffs because You guys probably saw the photo, just
Yeah,
towering
he's
over the
massive.
defensive end. Yeah, he was a guy I think had an opportunity to commit at one point to Texas, but I think as we stand now, probably a little bit lower on in the pecking order in terms of targets. But he committed to Syracuse this past weekend, so that's one guy. You can probably cross off the list in terms of guys in the mix. But yeah, it's going to be a bigger class too than we saw with the three guys in 2024. So it'll be an interesting position group to follow.
Yeah. Hank, any more word on what spring practice is like right now? I know you're really high on Jordan Washington, the freshman tight end that's in. Anybody else that you're high on or just heard that standing out in your opinion?
Yeah, you hear, I think Chip's on the same wavelength as me with, Aaron Butler, just a kid that's been really impressive in terms of, the guy that maybe a little bit overshadowed it with this receiving group coming in. And, maybe he's the guy that's going to stand out in year one at Texas. We'll see. Obviously there's a lot of options. I think DeAndre Moore is doing really well in practice. Trey Moore was getting a lot of hype from Sark in the post practice press conferences. So yeah, it sounds like everything's going pretty smoothly. I guess 5 practices in so far. So yeah, it's been a good run so far.